Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a new, young, successful author from Chennai, India, Pavithra Venkatesan. Pavithra, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here.
And congratulations for your first book.
Thank
Pavithra is an author of a book titled Archetypal Remembering, and she's the pattern intelligence practitioner. Today, we're going to speak about Pavitra's book, Archetypal Remembering. So, Pavitra, my first question, what personal experiences led you to write your book?
Thank you for the question. This particular question has been in my mind for the past few months since I published my book, because I know I published a book, but the particular experience and the pivotal moment was when I was facing that. I was in a very intense energetic state. So now when I reflected back upon it, there are several incidents that led to that particular pivotal point. But this one moment of becoming a mother and the experience of motherhood has cracked me open, which has led me into this holistic journey of becoming a coach and an author. And this book itself is a testament to that whole journey. That's how I would put it.
Amazing. And why did the idea of remembering feel more important than discovering or learning?
Learning, to me, it looks like expansion. It looks like something you're adding new and expanding to what you already don't know, right? But the idea of remembering came to me because I realized that we were already whole. We already needed everything that we need for the lifetime on this planet, the moment we set foot on this planet. But we were not told how to use that. We were not told, or no one ever pointed out that, hey, you already have everything. That is when the concept of remembering came from. As opposed to learning, this remembering is mostly the process of unlearning. Because we have societal conditionings, parental conditionings. Growing up, you didn't have a lot of choices, and not most of us don't make conscious choices when we were in childhood. We were told what to do, and we take instructions, and we believe what we were told. So that is why most part of our adulthood is about remembering and unlearning what we have learned in the earlier parts of our lives.
Well said. Well said. And Pavitra, tell me, how do you define archetypes in simple everyday language? Are archetypes fixed personalities, or can they evolve over time?
Archetypes are not necessarily personalities or identities, how we would like to call them. Archetypes, in the sense that I have defined in the book, I know Carl Jung has touched this concept of archetypes, very deeply. And the archetypes, from his view, represent the universal forces as they formed over time. Like as evolution happened, the universal forces that became a pattern, he described that as archetypes. In my book, the way that I looked at archetypes was, you have been put into enormous pressure and the stress from the moment you were born into the world, because you didn't know the language. You were given just a body, and you were given two set of people who you call parents. And from the moment you got to know them, from the moment you learned the language, everything involved stress. So archetypes are necessarily, the way I describe it is adaptive identities or adaptive responses to certain forces or stress. And that becomes a survival identity that we can call it as mask, we can call it as relational identity, or we can call it as patterns. That's what archetype means. That's how I touched it in the book. That's how I look at it.
Well said. Well said. And then tell me, why do so many people struggle to recognize their own archetype, which is shaping their behavior?
The societal and the parental conditioning plays a big role here.
Mm-hmm.
Early in our childhood, we were told that these are the certain set of good practices and bad practices. This is good and this is bad. All our belief systems, or at least most of our belief systems, form from what we were being told. So naturally, when I face a situation under pressure, the moment I face the world under that pressure, I choose to show the world a face that is pleasant, that is the best part of me. But what about the parts of us that were least discovered, right? We never go to that because the everyday life keep putting you under the pressure and the survival of keep, grind, do, and then come back to the place. So it's a cycle. And unfortunately, it became a vicious cycle of never having or having the least chance to go back to the least touched parts of us. That is where the role of archetypes come in. And that is where people struggle to identify their own archetypes because the mask that they put is so comfortable that at some point they believe that it is them. They believe so strongly that it is me. So there is no differentiation between them and the mask that they put on. So that's why the concept of archetypes come in. And when you look at it from that angle, you realize that you carry your patterns, but you are not your patterns.
Great response. Well said. In the chapter, How I Met My Archetype, what did you learn about yourself?
It was, I would have described that chapter in a very eclectic way, because I was, in my personal journey, I started very, very, very much from the societal and parental conditioning standpoint. So I did a degree, what my parents thought it's good. I did a degree in computer science, and I married and I moved abroad, and I had a chance to study again. But again, I gave into the conditioning when I had a choice to study whatever I wanted to study. But I had a choice, but then I gave into the conditioning because at that moment, this realization or the self-awareness was not strong enough in me to realize that, no, that is a mask, or that is what I was told to do, but I might not necessarily have to do that. So there are multiple failures, or I don't want to call it failures, but there are multiple pivotal points that I was given a chance to rewrite my own patterns, but I did not pick that up. So, and I also completed my master's in computer science in the US from a US university. I graduated, and when I started working, I thought I had everything set up. I had a great job, I had a great family, I had a great husband, and then my daughter came in, and I became a mother. That is the first time I'm realizing that. That is the first time I'm realizing that I'm giving something to someone which I was never given. Of course, when I describe I was never given, it's not completely from the lack, but there are gaps in the parenting journey that I had with my parents, just like everyone else's parenting journey. You don't exactly get everything from your parents. There's always a gap.
Correct.
And you realize that in your adulthood.
Absolutely. Well said. And then tell me, what inspired chapter titles like The Silent Voice and The Frozen Fire?
That's a great question. It's very good to know that the title names are being called out. So The Silent Voice, as in I named it, we can guess what that talks about. The silent voice is suppression of your own expression. That is also one of the parental and societal conditioning. In a meeting, in a room full of people, no matter how confident you are, you would have a self-doubt into, can I speak this or not? The moment you think that, there is a voice within you that calls out that, no, last time when you said this didn't go well, so don't say it. But
Yeah.
is that really true, or is
Mm.
that an assumption?
Correct.
We may never know.
Mm.
We don't, we are not, we are not equipped, or we are not encouraged enough to express our own thoughts
Mm.
in the society.
Mm.
We were set to go, in a get along with the world, get along with the family, get along
Mm.
with people around
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
That has been the theme of our life most of the time. So
Mm.
that is what the silent voice talks about, suppression of voice. But there is a caveat to it. Not every suppression of voice comes from, it is a behavior, the suppression of voice, but it comes from different backgrounds.
Mm.
Sometimes you do it to preserve your validation. Sometimes you do it to avoid the conflict. But if you look at it, the behavior is the same, but the source is not the same.
Mm.
And if you look at the frozen fire is an interesting archetype that I found in myself, also in other women around me, from working with other women. This particular archetype, if I have to describe it, this particular archetype, I'm using the word she because it's not about women,
Yeah.
it's about the feminine
Yeah.
intelligence, what
Yeah.
I mean. She suppressed and she freezes in order to avoid getting activated in a way that she's so scared of her own aliveness that she freezes to avoid that aliveness and the spontaneity. Because if you go back to the childhood pivotal point, for when this archetype was formed, her parents would have told her that, no, you're too alive, you're too spontaneous, don't jump here, don't jump there. That is when this archetype was formed.
Wow. So then tell
So,
me, sorry, go ahead, please, go ahead.
no, yeah, these are very different energetic imprints in our body, but what the modern psychology calls it is based on behavior. We call one behavior called people pleasing and suppression of expression, but we never realize that it comes from very eclectic different childhood backgrounds and the imprints that we undergo as children. Yeah, that's what I
Very
wanted to.
interesting. Very interesting. But then tell me, Pavithra, why do women silence their authentic voice? And I see this happening all the time.
Yep, it happened with me too. I had that journey. I lived the journey, and I know the whole, you know, uh, the whole planet is living it, as you call it.
Yeah.
But I want to look at it in a very different way here, because I know women predominantly, they were silenced in a history in the evolution. But I look at it slightly in a different way. It is the feminine intelligence that has been silenced, that has been suppressed. The feminine can be carried by both men and women. I have seen men who carry the same suppressed feminine intelligence. Men who carry a feminine essence, they are so scared of expressing themselves, because men were told to say, no, you're not supposed to cry. You're supposed to man up. You're supposed to be strong.
Yeah.
And on the other end, women were told, no, you're not supposed to speak up. You're not supposed to be loud. Both are detrimental to the development
Absolutely.
of the psyche. And I know many influencers and many psychologists are coming to this place because now the inner child work has become so popular and people are healing actively in a real time. So that's why the book was also about feminine intelligence, and the way that these archetypes we talk about, these are not specific to women. This is specific to the feminine in both men and women.
Absolutely right. Well said. And what would you say is the first step to move from shadow to awareness?
Shadow to awareness requires active. While you are in the pattern, you cannot see the pattern. You become the pattern. So actively taking one step back and then saying that I am not the pattern, I carry this pattern. This acknowledgement will help you look at the pattern in a little bit of detached way, knowing that is not you, making you step out of the pattern. When you step out of the pattern, you naturally observe it. That is the key step to go from shadow to the awareness.
Interesting. How can women reclaim power without becoming hardened?
This is the most beautiful and very, very rewarding part of my journey. When I first realized that I was not just suppressing my voice, I was also suppressing my daughter. I noticed my daughter crying loudly. You know, children cry loudly. So when she was a child, she was very loud. And I caught myself actively in the moment, looking at her and said, "Why are you so loud?" And suddenly it took me back to my childhood. The moment I was told that I was so loud, I was so spontaneous. I was more than alive than what people around can handle me for. So the power is not necessarily about being loud. If we look at children, they are the most gentlest part of the planet, but they are the most powerful beings. I realized this when I became a mother, and my daughter, and the experience of becoming mother to a girl child made me realize things that I would have never realized under enormous power. So is softness an absence of power? No. Is being loud, does being loud mean being powerful? Not necessarily. So keeping alive the softness in you while still being powerful is the holistic journey that I'm still going through and I have already embarked upon. So that is a way to reclaim the power without becoming so hard, because becoming hard means you put a shell around you, you put a layer around you saying that, no, you cannot touch me. That's why I feel safe. So hardening doesn't necessarily mean you have power. Just like I said, for the men, all the boys have been told that, no, you have to harden up. No, that is not power.
Absolutely.
Being vulnerable is the new power.
Correct. Very well said. And then tell me, how can people heal patterns they have inherited from their own family systems?
This is a whole area of work by itself. This has to be studied because the epigenetics has been recently started getting the traction in the research areas, because the way that we look at food, the way that we look at medicines have evolved significantly just by doing the epigenetic research. So not just food and medication, anything that goes into your body, you consume not just food, not just water, you consume emotions every day. You consume invisible things every day. Only the visible things that we put in the body has been spoken widely about. What about the invisible emotions that goes inside your body? You feed yourself emotions. So that should be studied as a separate area in the epigenetics. So this is a whole study by itself, but I will try to put it in a nutshell. The only place that you can, let's say that you are running a relay and you got the torch from your parents and you're passing it on to the future generation. Now you are the present. They were in the past, and your children are the future. So the more you are present, the more you are accepting towards your parents' failures, the less you pass it on to your future generation or your son and daughter. That is when you actively heal what has been passed to you, not by rejecting your parents, not by calling out on their failures or shortcomings, accepting that you did your best. Let me do what's the best I can.
Absolutely.
Also not hyper-fixated on, let me not pass anything on to my child. That is the place of destruction, because that comes from ego of being right. When you are from the ego of being right, you cannot actively heal.
Correct.
You are again passing the control to the future generation.
Absolutely.
Letting go of the control and accepting the trauma actively in the real time, being present with high self-awareness and acceptance is what's going to heal the future generation.
Great response. How can someone use your book during a period of emotional crisis?
That book is absolutely written for that exact reason. If you're in identity crisis, and you don't know who you are. Suddenly, all the identities that you held for the world, it all crumbled. That is when this book is going to be really, really an added asset to you. Even before that, you can read it. I'm not trying to say that it's not meant for that, but it's especially going to be very helpful during that period, because that is a moment you start asking these existential questions that if I'm not any of these I thought, then who am I? When you ask that question, that is when this book is going to add more context to it. Because this book is written in a reflective language, as in, I would have spoken about my experience, but I would not have made everything about my experience. It would have been in a reflective language where you can read this and say, this is what I have been living. If you are able to see that from the book, then you feel seen and heard and validated in your identity crisis, which is the most healing thing you can have at that particular moment.
Absolutely. Well said. Pavithra, I have time for two more questions for you. If viewers and listeners and your readers remember one message from your book, what would it be?
You are not your patterns. You hold your patterns. Remembering who you are starts with realizing that you are not your patterns.
Okay. And my last question for you, if the world truly embraced feminine intelligence, what would change first?
The first thing that would change is getting over this assumption that what is visible is what is real. The invisible parts of the human experiences would be spoken much more about. The relational experiences. Through that, the relationships evolve. When the relationships evolve, the world naturally becomes more trusting and feels safe with each other, which is very much missing in the world. The safety, the sense of psychological safety is what leads to a healthy planet and a healthy individual and a healthy future generations going forward. So the sense of safety, belonging, and freedom is what we need for the future generations to come. And feminine intelligence is a way for that, to do that.
Absolutely. And on that note, Pavithra, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation this has been about your book, Archetypal Remembering. You know, as you were speaking, I mean, I'm much, much older, but I remember even 55 years ago when I was trying to decide, or it was parents who were deciding for me what I wanted to do. And even though I didn't want to, I had to do it. I didn't realize that someone as young as you has also had to face something similar. And I'm sure people who are in their teens today are probably facing that. And I sometimes wonder why parents put children through the same pressure when they have gone through similar pressure themselves. Thank you so much for outlining so many different aspects of life, about archetypes, and how each one of us needs to recognize who we are and how we need to be able to change. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.